Somewhere in the darkness of occupied France, 1943, a British commando crouches behind a stone wall. His target, a German officer standing guard 200 meters away, smoking a cigarette, completely unaware. The commando raises his weapon, aims and fires. The officer drops instantly. But here's what makes this moment extraordinary. The soldiers standing just 30 meters from the fallen officer heard nothing. No gunshot, no echo, no warning, just silence and then confusion. The weapon responsible for this ghost-like kill was not a product of some futuristic laboratory. It was designed by a motorcycle engineer in a small workshop in Dagenham, England. And what he created would become one of the most lethal and mysterious weapons of World War II. Subscribe and hit the bell to discover how a carbine designed in secrecy became the silent assassin of the Second World War. It was 1942. The world was engulfed in total war. The Allies were planning increasingly daring operations behind enemy lines, sabotage missions, assassinations, intelligence gathering. But there was a critical problem. Every weapon available to special forces made noise, loud noise. A rifle shot could be heard for kilometers. Even suppressed weapons of the era, like the well-rod pistol, were limited in range and stopping power. What the British Special Operations Executive desperately needed was a weapon that combined three seemingly incompatible characteristics: long-range accuracy, lethal stopping power, and near-total silence. Most military engineers considered this combination impossible. The laws of physics seemed to forbid it, but William Godfray de Lisle, a design engineer at the Ford Motor Company's Dagenham plant, saw it differently. He wasn't a weapons expert. He designed motorcycles and automotive components, but he had an idea that would change the rules of covert warfare forever. De Lisle understood something fundamental about firearm noise. The crack of a gunshot comes from two sources: the explosive gases escaping the barrel and the supersonic crack of the bullet breaking the sound barrier. Most suppressor designs of the era focused only on the first problem. They used baffles and expansion chambers to slow and cool the gases. But if the bullet still traveled faster than sound, the weapon would still produce a loud crack. De Lisle's genius was to solve both problems simultaneously. He would use a subsonic cartridge, the 45 ACP, normally used in pistols like the Colt M1911. This round traveled at roughly 270 meters per second, well below the speed of sound. That eliminated the supersonic crack. Then he designed an integrated suppressor, built directly into the barrel, not attached as an afterthought. This suppressor was massive by the standards of the time, over 30 centimeters long, with a complex series of baffles and expansion chambers that reduced the muzzle blast to almost nothing. The result was a weapon that, when fired, produced a sound no louder than a cough, a metallic click, a whisper in the night. But de Lisle didn't stop there. He needed a reliable action, something proven in combat, so he chose the Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle, the standard British infantry weapon, known for its smooth operation and rugged reliability. He took the Enfield action, modified it to accept the 45 ACP cartridge in a single-stack magazine holding 7 rounds, and married it to his suppressed barrel. The stock was cut down to carbine length for easier handling in close quarters. The final product was a weapon unlike anything else in existence. It was 37 inches long, weighed just under 4 kilograms, and could kill silently at ranges up to 200 meters. In the hands of a trained operator, it was devastating, and because it used a bolt action, there was no mechanical noise from a cycling slide or ejecting brass. Just the faint click of the firing pin, the muffled thump of the suppressor, and silence. The first prototypes of the de Lisle carbine were produced in 1942. Initial tests were conducted at British firing ranges under conditions of extreme secrecy. The results stunned military observers. At 50 meters, the de Lisle was quieter than a suppressed well-rod pistol. At 100 meters, it was nearly inaudible to anyone not directly in line with the muzzle. And at 200 meters, it could still deliver a lethal shot with the heavy 45 caliber bullet, which retained enough energy to incapacitate a target even at extended range. The weapon was immediately classified. Production was limited. Exact numbers remain unclear to this day, but estimates suggest that fewer than 200 de Lisle carbines were ever manufactured. They were issued exclusively to elite units, the British commandos, the Special Operations Executive, and select intelligence operatives operating in occupied Europe. This was not a weapon for conventional infantry. It was a tool for assassination, sabotage, and psychological warfare. One of the most documented uses of the de Lisle occurred during Operation Jaywick in 1943. A small team of British and Australian commandos infiltrated Japanese-occupied Singapore harbour using a captured fishing boat. Their mission, to attach limpet mines to Japanese shipping and escape undetected. But the mission required absolute silence. Any gunfire would alert the Japanese garrison and doom the entire operation. The commandos carried de Lisle carbines. On the night of the attack, as they moved through the harbour, they encountered Japanese sentries. Using the de Lisle, the commandos eliminated the guards without raising an alarm. The suppressed carbine allowed them to kill at close range, with no noise, no muzzle flash, and no evidence. The limpet mines were successfully placed. Days later, 7 Japanese ships were sunk or severely damaged. The Japanese never discovered how the saboteurs had penetrated their defenses. The silence of the de Lisle had made the impossible possible. But the true power of the de Lisle was not just mechanical, it was psychological. Imagine being a German soldier stationed in occupied France. You're on night patrol with your unit. Suddenly, the man next to you collapses. No sound, no warning, just a body hitting the ground. You look around, nothing, no muzzle flash, no gunshot echo. Panic sets in. Is it a sniper? Where is he? How far away? You can't return fire because you don't know where the threat is coming from. Your entire unit is paralyzed by fear. That psychological effect, that terror of the unseen killer, was as valuable as the weapon's lethality. It disrupted enemy operations, demoralized troops, and created an atmosphere of paranoia that no amount of conventional firepower could achieve. However, the de Lisle was not without limitations. The 45 ACP cartridge, while subsonic and effective at close to medium range, lacked the long-range performance of standard rifle rounds. Beyond 200 meters, accuracy and stopping power dropped significantly. The weapon was also relatively heavy for its size, and the integrated suppressor made it front-heavy and somewhat awkward to carry. Additionally, the single-stack magazine held only 7 rounds, requiring frequent reloading in sustained engagements. But these were acceptable trade-offs for a weapon designed for specific, high-value missions. The de Lisle was never intended to replace the rifle or the submachine gun. It was a specialist tool, and in the hands of a specialist, it was unmatched. As the war progressed, the de Lisle saw action in multiple theaters. In the European theater, it was used by SOE agents conducting sabotage and assassination missions in France, Norway, and the Low Countries. In the Pacific, it was employed by commandos operating behind Japanese lines in Burma, Malaya, and the Philippines. In every case, the weapon's silence gave Allied operators a critical advantage. They could strike without warning, disappear without a trace, and leave the enemy questioning their own security. The de Lisle became a legend among those who knew of its existence, but because of its classified status, very few people outside of elite military circles ever heard of it. Even today, decades after the war, the de Lisle remains one of the least known weapons of World War II. After the war ended in 1945, most de Lisle carbines were destroyed or placed in secure storage. The weapon was considered too sensitive to be released to the public or even to regular military units. A small number were retained by British special forces and intelligence agencies for post-war operations during the early Cold War. But by the 1950s, advances in suppressor technology and the development of new subsonic ammunition made the de Lisle obsolete. Modern suppressed weapons, like the suppressed Sterling submachine gun and later the Heckler & Koch MP5SD, offered greater firepower, lighter weight, and comparable silence. The de Lisle faded into obscurity. Today, surviving examples are extremely rare and highly sought after by collectors and military historians. A functional de Lisle carbine can fetch tens of thousands of dollars at auction, and many are held in museums or private collections, but the legacy of the de Lisle extends far beyond its physical existence. It proved that silence could be a weapon as powerful as firepower. It demonstrated that unconventional thinking, applied to conventional problems, could produce revolutionary results. William Godfray de Lisle was not a career weapons designer. He was an engineer who saw a need and filled it with ingenuity and precision. His carbine influenced the development of suppressed weapons for decades. Modern special forces around the world still use suppressed firearms based on principles that de Lisle pioneered: subsonic ammunition, integrated suppressors, and bolt-action reliability. The de Lisle was the grandfather of the modern suppressed sniper rifle, and its ghost still haunts the battlefields of history. There is also a deeper lesson in the story of the de Lisle carbine. It reminds us that innovation often comes from unexpected places. The greatest breakthroughs are not always made by experts with decades of experience. Sometimes they are made by outsiders who approach problems from a different angle, who refuse to accept that something is impossible simply because it has never been done before. William de Lisle had no formal training in firearms design, but he had curiosity, determination, and the willingness to challenge assumptions, and that was enough to create a weapon that changed the course of covert warfare. In the decades since World War II, the de Lisle has appeared occasionally in popular culture. It has been featured in films, video games, and novels as the weapon of choice for silent assassins and elite operatives. But these portrayals often miss the true significance of the weapon. The de Lisle was not just a tool for killing. It was a symbol of Allied ingenuity, of the willingness to innovate under pressure, and of the understanding that wars are won not just with brute force, but with intelligence, creativity, and the courage to try something new. Every time a modern special forces operator uses a suppressed weapon to complete a mission without detection, they are standing on the shoulders of William de Lisle and the men who carried his carbine into the darkness of occupied Europe. So the next time you hear about a silent weapon, a suppressed rifle, or a covert operation conducted without a sound, remember the de Lisle carbine. Remember the motorcycle engineer who designed it in a small workshop in Dagenham. Remember the commandos who carried it into enemy territory, knowing that their lives depended on its silence. And remember that sometimes the most powerful weapons are not the loudest. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are the ones you never hear. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video, because there are many more stories like this waiting to be told. What other secret weapon do you think changed the course of history? Leave your answer in the comments.